Especially on young trees, I use herbicide around them. Grass is a really severe competitor for chestnuts, so I use a grass-specific herbicide. I have used Post, P-O-A-S-T, and I've used Fusilade, both of which work well for grass control if you apply it at the right time of year. And then to control broadleaves, or the big problem we have with poison ivy and brambles and multiflora rose, what works well against those is a herbicide called Crossbow, which is a brush killer. And it turns out that chestnuts are not very sensitive to crossbow, so a little bit of drift onto the trees is not so harmful. So I use a combination of Fusilade in the spring, crossbow in the middle of the summer, to keep an area right around the tree clear of weeds. Before planting, I usually use Roundup, but I don't use Roundup after the trees are there, because the danger of getting some Roundup on the tree are too great, and it does really permanent damage or long-term damage to the chestnuts. So Roundup before planting, Fusilade and Crossbow after planting. Chestnut weevils are maybe the most serious insect pest, and certainly chestnut weevils exist throughout Virginia. That's the little curculio that lays eggs in the nuts, causes what people call wormy nuts. And the tolerance among consumers for wormy nuts is essentially zero. And an orchard without any control at all will soon become 100% infested. And so weevil control is absolutely essential. On a small scale, you can control weevils simply by sanitation, that is, picking up the nuts before the grubs emerge. In the life cycle of the insect, the grub tunnels through the nut and then emerges, usually a week or two after the nuts fall to the ground. The grub emerges and overwinters underground. If you can pick the nuts up before the weevils emerge, you can control them that way. That works okay if you got a small acreage, and can be extremely vigilant about harvesting the nuts every day and not let any grubs emerge. The system breaks down if you've got chipmunks or squirrels hauling nuts away and caching them. That will allow the grubs to emerge, and then you'll see them again in 2 years. If you get infestation rates that are higher than 5%, or you have a large orchard and you can't keep up with the harvest, then you'll probably have to go to chemical control. If you use insecticides, the one to use is a pyrethroid, and you need to apply that when the adults arrive in the tree, and that's right at the time when the kernel begins to become solid within the shell. So you can actually tell the right time to apply the pesticide when you cut a nut open and you see a solid kernel in there. Now for us, that's usually mid-August. It won't be too much different in Virginia. So we either make 1 or 2 applications, say one in mid-August and then one 2 weeks later, 1st of September. That does give you adequate time before harvest, so you don't want to apply the pesticide right before harvest. And those can be very effective in controlling the weevils. The other thing we do, the tolerance for weevil infestation is near zero. So after we harvest, all the nuts go into a hot water bath, which is 118 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. Temperature is very critical on that. If it's a couple degrees too warm, it'll kill the nuts and then they'll spoil quickly. If it's a couple degrees too cold, it won't kill the weevils, and it's a waste of time. So the 20-minute hot water bath is 100% effective, but the temperature is very critical. Gall wasp arrived here around 2008, and usually by the time a grower notices the galls, that means the insect has already been there for about 3 years. It just takes that long for the population to build up to the point that you see it. Once you can see it, the population explodes dramatically, and in 2010 and 2011 we had extensive damage, and I think some trees died due to infestations with gall wasps. And we still had adequate yield, and the gall wasp has no effect on the nut directly, but it has a tremendous effect on the growth of the tree. Interestingly, the only control for gall wasp that works is a biological control by some parasitoid wasps, some of which were imported from China and some of which are native and work on the gall formers on oak trees. Both introduced parasitoids and the native parasitoids have teamed up, and after a few years the gall wasps completely disappeared. It's the only problem I know that solved itself. So there really are no insecticides that have been shown to be effective, and even genetic resistance has not endured very long, but the biological control from both the introduced and the native parasitoid wasps has worked really well. The last 2 years I have not seen a single gall here, so it was a problem that got bad for 2 years and then disappeared. The gall forms basically as a shoot. As a bud breaks and starts to grow, instead of forming a normal shoot, it just forms a gall, and so that shoot cannot grow. When a high proportion of the buds on the tree are galls instead of shoots, then the tree has a hard time forming leaves and forming branches and forming flowers and fruit. So once the gall forms, that's the end of that one. You got to have another good shoot that will form buds for the next year. So the gall is kind of terminally kills the shoots. The non-galled shoots will grow on and become normal, and once you don't have gall wasps there, then the tree fills in its crown and reverts back to kind of a normal canopy.